The American Civil War, a 4-year ordeal that reshaped the United States and redefined what it meant to be a nation conceived in liberty. It's a tale of courage, tragedy, and, let's face it, a lot of bad decisions made by men in uncomfortable wool uniforms. Let's dive in. The roots of the Civil War go deeper than the 1860s. Tensions had been simmering since the founding of the nation. The main sticking point? Slavery. The northern states, moving toward an industrial economy, were less dependent on enslaved labor. The southern states, with their vast cotton plantations, relied on it. Add in some disagreements about states' rights versus federal authority, and you've got yourself a country-sized powder keg. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the match. Lincoln, a Republican, opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories. The southern states saw his election as a direct threat to their way of life. South Carolina, never one to shy away from dramatic exits, seceded first on December 20th, 1860. Within months, 10 more states joined, forming the Confederate States of America. By April 1861, the fragile Union broke apart. Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, and the Civil War officially began. Spoiler alert, it's about to get messy. At first, both sides thought the war would be over in a few months. That's cute. The Union, with a population of 22 million and an industrial base, figured it would crush the Confederacy's 9 million people, of whom 4 million were enslaved. But the South had its advantages: skilled generals, a strong military tradition, and the motivation to defend its home turf. The first major battle, the First Battle of Bull Run, or Manassas, depending on where you're from, proved just how unprepared everyone was. Civilians from Washington, D.C. came out with picnic baskets to watch the fight, thinking it would be a quick Union victory. It wasn't. Confederate forces, led by generals like Stonewall Jackson, sent the Union troops scrambling back to the capital, and so began the bloody back and forth. In 1862, the Union devised the Anaconda Plan. No, it wasn't a failed marketing campaign for a nature documentary. It was a strategy to choke off the South by blockading its ports and controlling the Mississippi River. Meanwhile, Confederate General Robert E. Lee waged aggressive campaigns in the East, proving himself a brilliant tactician. But the war wasn't just fought on the battlefield. It was a war of resources and endurance. The Union's superior infrastructure allowed it to produce more weapons, transport troops efficiently, and, yes, make canned beans. The South struggled to maintain supplies, especially as the blockade tightened. One key turning point came in September 1862, when the Union achieved a strategic victory at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland. It was the bloodiest single day in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. While it wasn't a decisive Union win, it gave Lincoln the momentum he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation, effective January 1st, 1863, declared that all enslaved people in Confederate-controlled areas were free. It didn't immediately free anyone. Confederates weren't exactly taking orders from Lincoln, but it changed the war's purpose. Now, it wasn't just about preserving the Union, it was a fight for freedom. 1863 also saw the Union win at Gettysburg, a 3-day battle in Pennsylvania that became the war's most famous engagement. Lee's attempt to invade the North failed spectacularly. Coupled with Ulysses S. Grant's victory at Vicksburg, which gave the Union control of the Mississippi River, the tide began to turn. By 1864, Grant was in charge of the Union armies, and he had one goal: total war. His relentless campaign in Virginia and General William Tecumseh Sherman's infamous march to the sea left the South in ruins. Sherman's troops cut a swath of destruction through Georgia, burning crops, tearing up railroads, and probably ruining more than a few backyard barbecues. The Confederate economy, already teetering, collapsed. By 1865, Lee's forces were outnumbered, outgunned, and starving. On April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The war was over. But let's not sugarcoat it. The costs were staggering. An estimated 620,000 to 750,000 soldiers died and millions were wounded. The South lay in ruins, its economy shattered. Enslaved people were freed. But the promises of Reconstruction would soon give way to Jim Crow laws and systemic racism that endured for generations. The Civil War remains the deadliest conflict in American history. Its legacy continues to shape the United States, serving as a stark reminder of what happens when a nation fails to bridge its divides. So, what have we learned? Maybe that democracy is fragile. Maybe that leadership matters. Or maybe just that wool uniforms are a terrible choice for summer battles. And as we remember those who lived and died during the Civil War, let's not forget the lesson. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought within ourselves. That's the story of the American Civil War. Brutal, transformative, and deeply human.